Welcome to the Mint Special. I'm Andy Hodges. What is the situation on the ground in Zimbabwe? Is the Zimbabwe economy in crisis? Look, with a parallel market rate trading at a reported 400 to 1 United States dollar against an official exchange rate of 173 and an interbank rate at 275 to 1 US dollar. An annual inflation rate for April hitting 96.4%, caused by what analysts say is the twin effects of imported inflation, principally food and fuel, and domestic inflationary pressures, mainly due to the rampant parallel market rate and money supply growth, and what the Zimbabwe government calls ill discipline in the economy. The Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe policy rate at 80%, one of the highest rates in the world. Prices of goods and services rising on a sometimes daily basis, with some products up over 200% over the last few weeks. According to the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, citizens lack confidence in Zimbabwe's currency, the Zimbabwe dollar, and prefer to keep their earnings and savings in foreign currency, especially the United States dollar. On top of all of this, stagnant wages and salaries. This briefly is a snapshot of the situation prevailing in Zimbabwe. Step in the Zimbabwean government, who last week announced a raft of measures, including freezing all bank lending to make the Zimbabwe dollar a convenient medium of exchange in local transactions, while disincentivizing use of the United States dollar and moving in to rein on market indiscipline and boost confidence in the economy. So are the measures announced a right or wrong move? Will these measures have an impact on the parallel exchange rate and help to reduce inflation and inflationary pressures? Will prices of goods and services stabilize and hopefully correct downwards? Will the measures actually work? And is there actually ill discipline by certain players in the economy? Joining us on the Mint Special today to discuss is the Zimbabwe economy in crisis, we welcome Zimbabwe's Minister of Finance and Economic Development, Professor Ntuli Ncube. Minister, welcome to the Mint Special.
Thank you.
Minister, is the Zimbabwean economy in crisis as maintained by some economic analysts and market commentators? In fact, some go so far as to say that the economy may soon be approaching hyperinflation. Your comment?
The global economy is under pressure. What we've seen is a rise in the oil price, is an increase in global inflation. If you look at it now, the US inflation is at its highest level in many years. UK inflation, everywhere inflation is up. The US dollar is at its strongest since 2002. If you look at the US dollar index, that's quite high at the moment. So all of that is putting pressure on all emerging markets, and it is transmitting inflation, global inflation, into emerging markets. But of course, we do have domestic issues that we also grapple with here in Zimbabwe. Looking at our fundamentals, let me go through the fundamentals. Let's start with the trade picture. It's quite strong. Exports are steady. Inflows from exporters and remittances are at the highest level ever, over 10 billion almost end, in the last year or so, and almost 2.5 billion end just in the first quarter. So that's the export picture, and we have a current account positive position, a current account surplus. You look at the fiscal position, that's just as strong. We are balancing our budget easily from year to year, and we continue to live within our means. If you look at the monetary sector, we've just actually reduced the monetary target, FOM 0 to 0% growth per quarter for the rest of the year. So our fundamentals are strong, but then yet we see the power market raging the way it has been doing. That partly it has to do with the global situation, which I've just explained, because we're using a hard currency, being the US dollar, and the domestic currency. So agents also react to global uncertainty very, very quickly, in fact much quicker than other agents in other countries because of this usage of a dual currency. But also there is speculative behavior, which is inherent in our market. There is also the hysteresis from having come out of a hyperinflation environment in the past, prior to 2009. All of that history and overhang is still sitting on agents, so they tend to overreact. But there's a lot of rent seeking as well, or indiscipline in the market.
But I'll get to that later. But I mean, so specifically, in your view and the government of Zimbabwe's view, the Zimbabwean economy is not in crisis. This is what you're saying.
No, it's not in crisis. Our growth projection is strong. We still expect growth closer to the 5% that we projected. We may temper with that, but we're still seeing a positive upturn in the economy, which began in 2021.
So, Minister, you did just mention ill discipline or undiscipline in the market. Can you explain exactly what you mean by that?
Well, it's basically agents not adhering to the law, to the regulations, whether it pertains to the way the currency is treated, trading in the parallel market, which is disallowed, all manner of discipline that we see, the way they go around, investing in the equity market or in the forex market itself, the way prices are raging on in the retail sector. All of that indiscipline is something that we need to deal with, and we will make sure that we will enforce the measures that we'll put in place to deal with this indiscipline.
Let's talk about the measures, because last week, of course, the Zimbabwe government announced a raft of measures in an effort to, and I quote, rein in market indiscipline and boost confidence in the economy. Let's start, Minister, with suspension of all bank lending. Look, analysts say that such a move is unsustainable, as no economy can survive without some form of credit creation. What was the intention behind the suspension? And furthermore, how long does the government intend to keep it in place?
First of all, we're not the first country to do this. In fact, within the African continent, we're aware that Ethiopia has also done the same, suspended lending. These are temporary measures, so our measure is quite temporary. What we're trying to do is to prick the speculative bubble, which has emerged in the forex market, as well as in the equity market. What we have found out, we have information, and we know some of the perpetrators, that they were using banks to borrow cheap liquidity, cheap in the sense of with negative real interest rates, to then speculate, take positions on the parallel market, but also then route some of the proceeds onto the equity market, and then just keep playing around between the equity market and the power market and so forth. So we had to prick that bubble, and this is how we decided to do it.
So then why not just use interest rates? Why not just raise interest rates to high levels, 300% for example, to stifle lending rather than suspending all lending?
We could have done both, raise interest rates and suspend all lending, but we decided to do one. If you raise interest rates sharply to deal with speculation, sometimes you tend to punish the honest. Those who are, in the real sector were productive. We borrowed loans, genuine loans, and it will increase the non-performing loans problem. The NPLs go up. So we don't want to punish the honest and increase the NPLs. We rather deal with the speculation by constraining the liquidity that you're giving to them to speculate. So that's what we did. As I said, it is temporary. We'll get to a point where we'll again loosen up and open up.
Now, I did mention in my preamble that the parallel market rate is now hitting around 500 to 1 Zimbabwe dollar here locally in Zimbabwe. And what some commentators are actually saying could be out of control, depreciating sometimes almost on a daily basis. What are your views on the reason for this?
As I said earlier, the fundamentals that determine currency movements are strong. And we also have, for the first time in a very long time, we have reserves at the central bank of $1 billion. That hasn't happened in years. I talked about the other fundamentals, which is a strong current account position, a strong fiscal policy position, a very strong monetary policy stance, and a very tight monetary policy stance. The fundamentals for a strong currency are in place, and yet we see this situation, which has to do, as I say, with indiscipline, with hysteresis, with rent-seeking behavior, which is inherent in any situation where a population has come from a hyperinflation environment. But also it could be a function of the fact that we have a dual currency system, which of necessity we must have because we don't have balance of payment support, we don't have access to offshore credit lines easily. So we need to harness the US dollars, which are already in circulation, and we've been using the auction market in the main to direct those US dollars to sectors that need them the most, which is the importers, and that has worked quite well.
Now, you did mention earlier that the parallel market rate is one of the major causes for the inflationary pressure in the economy. How then do these measures actually address the parallel market rate? Because obviously that does have an impact on prices of goods and services for Zimbabwean citizens.
The parallel market is exhibiting an asset price bubble, bringing the price of foreign exchange rate. But that's also what you see in the equity market with the London Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. So the idea was to prick the bubble of speculation and begin to constrain certain behavioral practices that were just pushing on the speculation and causing havoc in the market. What we've also done, you see the list of measures that His Excellency announced, the President announced, included an increase in the transactions tax for use of US dollars. So again, that is meant to tilt a preference towards the Zimbabwe dollar. we also decided to increase, or rather to say that the ZIMRA rate, that is the reference rates for payment of duties, should be the buyer willing seller rate, which is closer to a rate that we believe is market determined.
That's at 275 to 1, roughly, around there.
Yes, and of course it might change, it might go down, it might go up. It is the market after all. The point is that it should be market determined. So we've done all those measures just to make sure that we begin to deal with this excessive behavior of overshooting in the value of the currency and bring things to an even keel.
I mean, you mentioned the IMT tax, or increasing the percentage that you would charge for people using US dollars, particularly cash or transfers of US dollars. But won't that also stimulate what we call the pillow bank? People still maintaining their US dollars under their mattresses and under their pillows rather than putting it into the formal system.
This is an ordinary, in economics it's called the Tobin tax, named after James Tobin, who's a Nobel Prize winner in economics, who devised certain taxes that ought to be charged on certain transactions, forex transactions, to discourage speculative behavior. So that's what we did here. We tried to make sure that we tilt a demand or preference towards the domestic currency. That's the right thing to do, although we know that we're going through a transition where both currencies are in play. They are both transaction currencies domestically, but that was the intention. The intention is then to make sure that we incentivize the use of the domestic currency. I think that's a good thing.
So you're not saying that you want to actually punish Zimbabweans for holding US dollars? I mean, that would
No. The idea is to incentivize them to use the domestic currency even more.
Minister, the government has insisted on maintaining the current Dutch auction system, although it has not been able to satisfy the market's requirements, and not been able to immediately settle successful bids, sometimes taking, is reported, as long as 10 weeks to settle such bids. The current auction system has faced criticism, especially from Zimbabwe's business community. They state that the system is not an auction but a price-fixing platform and needs to be reformed. Your comment?
The president's announcements were very clear. He said that the central bank should sell the forex that it has and nothing more, and also that all payments should be made within a period of 14 days. So it's very clear. And that's what the central bank is going to do. So what that will do to make sure that the auction lives within its means. At the same time, we're continuing to improve and fine-tune the price discovery process. We introduced a willing buyer, willing seller window, again to further improve the price discovery process. And I think that has gone a long way in that direction. That's the feedback we are getting from the market. So it's a continuous improvement or Taton more process in terms of getting to the right exchange rate as we keep discovering in terms of the actions that we do.
I mean, there has been
but the auction is delivered, big time in terms of just being a source of foreign currency for for importers rather. That's why you find that our industries are booming. The quantity of goods that are on our shelves is also on a record high. Easily 70% of the goods on our shelves are locally produced, and it's because producers have access to foreign currency for the first time in a long time. The price is another issue, but they have access to foreign currency. Even the gap, as long as they eventually know that they will receive the foreign currency, which they eventually do, they keep going and they're doing great, and we will eliminate the backlog for sure.
No, but commentators state though that there is no information about what the interbank rate is, or what's being transacted in it, what price is being done, and the volumes to it. That information is not out there in the public space.
The information is produced every week in terms of the auction. We publish the amount that was
the auction,
traded.
yes, but the interbank rate.
That will also publish. Okay. There's no problem there at all.
So you will
the
publish
idea is
we're
committed to transparency as a government in terms of that rate. That's very, very important, in fact. We'll publicize that rate.
Minister, something that's worrying a lot of commentators and analysts is that Zimbabwe appears to be transacting in 3 exchange rates against the US dollar. You first got the official auction rate, which of course is around 173 to 1 as of yesterday. Secondly, the interbank rate at 275 to 1 US dollars. And of course, the parallel market rate around 400 to 1. How is such a scenario possible, even acceptable to you? And what are your plans to harmonize the rates into one? I mean, some ask, for example, why not just liberalize the exchange rate completely?
But for a start, the willing buyer, willing seller window is a commitment to us as government that we are, of course, committed to a market-determined exchange rate. It is a market-determined exchange rate. So as I said, we're committed to improving the price discovery process for currency in this economy. We're going through a transition. Yes, we may have 2-3 exchange rates. We're going through a transition. We're still reforming. And some of the measures we've taken are really meant to deal with that, to make sure that we narrow the spreads between these markets, and then we can eventually get to some kind of convergence. And we're, of course, searching for that equilibrium, and we will get there. I'm certain of that.
Because, of course, being Minister of Finance, having 3 exchange rates in an economy is definitely not a good idea, is it, sir?
Oh, of course, we want to make sure that there's uniformity, there's sanity. As I said, we'll get there, hence the measures that we took to make sure that we at least narrow the spreads between these exchange rates, and then we eventually get some convergence at some point.
Now, analysts have pointed the finger at your government, at President Mnangagwa's government, as one of the main players in inadvertently driving the parallel market rate upwards. They imply that Zimbabwean dollars are being paid by the government to contractors, particularly for infrastructure projects, and that's finding its way into the parallel market as the contractors try and preserve value. What would be your comment to that?
Yes, we as government found out ourselves that certain of the contractors who are doing a good job, in fact, in building infrastructure projects, various things, are also changing their monies in the power market, particularly the foreign contractors. So we've taken some action in that direction. So first of all, we've reduced the number of foreign contractors on our infrastructure projects. But that's also a good thing for another reason, to empower more locals. But secondly, we're making sure that we're paying a part of what we owe them as government on an ongoing basis, of course, in hard US dollars. So we reduce the Zim dollar element. Then on the Zimbabwe dollar element, we're also spreading out that payment so that they don't rush to the power market in one fell swoop and cause these blips that you see. So we are aware of this, and we're managing that, and we're dealing with it.
You did mention money supply growth and the targets. I mean, because one of the criticisms, of course, is that money supply growth is one of the factors driving Zimbabwe's internal inflation. A target has now been set for 0% money supply growth. So the question is, Minister, is this an acknowledgement by the government that money supply growth was unsustainable? And some may ask why you have not been keeping it in check all this time.
We've been keeping it in check, but we're not enough. At least that's what the speculators are showing us, that we needed to do more, and we've done more. We are now have a target of M0 growth at 0% per quarter for the rest of the year. That's a good thing. That's a commitment to tight monetary policy. But also restricting lending, domestic lending, is a way to control broad money, M2 and M3. So that again is a measure to deal with growth in money supply. So we're dealing with it. So tight monetary policy on one front, tight fiscal policy on another, and taking other varieties of measures to promote the use of the domestic currency.
But doesn't that put pressure on government? Because I know on your budget statement you did mention a number that government would have to go into the local domestic capital markets to raise funding for. Well, isn't that going to put pressure on government raising enough funding to meet its budget commitment?
You know what? As a government, we always live within our means. We will spend what we have. We're committed to that. But also what has happened is that because of increases in inflation, you will find that we'll start collecting more in terms of VAT and other taxes which are linked to price movements. So that's going to increase our revenues, of course in nominal terms, not in real terms. But all of that will kind of compensate slightly for the decrease in access to domestic borrowing. But also we're not fixated on borrowing. I'm not a big fan of any borrowing, frankly, given where our debt levels are. So I'm not worried about that at all.
Time for us to take a breather. You're watching the Mint Special with Zimbabwe's Minister of Finance and Economic Development, Professor Ntuli Ncube. Our discussion is the Zimbabwe economy in crisis. This broadcast is brought to you by Zim Papers TV network ZTN. Don't go away. The Mint Special, we'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching the Mint Special. Our guest today, Zimbabwe's Minister of Finance and Economic Development, Professor Ntuli Ncube. Our discussion is the Zimbabwe economy in crisis. This broadcast is brought to you by Zim Papers TV network ZTN. Minister, it is a fact that prices of goods and services in Zimbabwe are going up almost daily as they track the parallel market race, or worse, the perceived forward parallel market race. This is having a major impact on Zimbabwean citizens who are finding it harder and harder each day to make ends meet. The new measure stated, and I quote, "Retailers and wholesalers are, with immediate effect, allowed to benchmark their prices to the average interbank rate with a maximum allowable variance of 10%. Analysts state, however, that this measure may lead to goods disappearing from shelves, be difficult to enforce, and also only covers the formal market and not the informal market, which accounts for, reports say, 70% of all transactions in the economy." Your comment?
Oh, well, I don't think that this measure will result in goods disappearing from the shelves. No, that won't happen. Because we believe that this willing buyer, willing seller rate, which is a market rate, really should be able to protect us against any feeling out there that this is an outrageous rate, because it's not. And then secondly, yes, there's a thriving informal market. We have put in place several measures to deal with that. In terms of taxation, we put in a location tax. We have a 2% identity tax, which also should cover us in terms of reaching out to the informal market. Of course, there will be leakages and so forth, and it creates difficulties in enforcement. But again, we're committed to enforcing that pronouncement by His Excellency the President.
But it appears then that we have, I can call it, two economies. You have the formal economy where Zim dollars are accepted by retailers and major shops. Then you've got what I can call downtown Zimbabwe, where basically it's all principally US dollars. Surely that's a worry for you as Minister of Finance.
Well, we have a dual currency. Those are the facts. So the fact that one part of the economy is using US dollars, the other isn't, or using less of US dollars, is not the issue. They're actually using the currencies that we allowed them to use in the first place. So there's no difficulty there. I think the difficulty is whether are we collecting enough taxes, perhaps, from that informal sector. And this is an area of continuous focus for us. And we've done a few measures, as I said, to increase our tax collection, net in terms of the informal sector.
And also install confidence in the informal sector.
Absolutely.
Now, Zimbabwe's government, your government that you're in, sir, has reiterated its commitment to maintaining a dual currency system. So the first question, of course, is why? Why not just ban all use of the US dollar in transactions within Zimbabwe's borders?
Well, at the moment, Zimbabwe cannot afford to have a sole Zim dollar rather used as the legal tender and nothing else. Why? We need the US dollar at the moment. Why? Because we don't have credit lines that can easily be accessed by our banks to support our industrial our sector. Those credit lines it's a real problem. We lost many credit lines in the past because of our issues with arrears, issues with sanctions and so forth. So we have no choice but to have a hard currency like a US dollar circulating domestically. Then we can harness the US dollars that are what that we're receiving, that are circulating within the economy through an auction or some kind of platform like an auction. But in this case, it's an auction. But it's necessary when we're in that kind of situation. And then we direct those US dollars to the sectors that need them, being the importing sector or some other citizens who want to send money abroad to pay for this and that. So this is a necessary situation that we need to be in because of the fact that we have no access to credit lines.
So it's a transition.
It's transitional, absolutely transitional. So one day we will have a monocurrency with the Zimbabwe dollar as the only legal tender or sole currency for usage domestically. Mind you, Andy, when you get to that point, things will change dramatically as well. In a normal country, think of any country that uses its domestic currency as the sole currency domestically. You have to liquidate your forex receipts immediately, for example. You cannot do certain things. Everything has been done using domestic currency. So I don't think we want to get to a point where we say then liquidate your balances in the banks at the moment. We've got about 1.5 billion US dollars. We're not there. The reason why those have to be maintained, and as government, we have no interest in touching those monies. We've got our own US dollars as government. I don't need those.
In fact, you raised a good point there,
but if you move to a monocurrency being a Zimbabwe dollar, it will put those US dollars at risk. So we don't want to go there.
Because one of the rumors in the marketplace, of course, is that the government is going to raid FCA accounts like they did in the past, and that seems to mean discounted.
No, we don't need those US dollars. We don't. We've got our own resources. Government has its own US dollars, which it raises through taxes and other US dollar fees. So we're very comfortable with where we are at the moment. and we want the status quo to remain. So the private sector keeps its export proceeds in the banks or wherever, and that's okay because we've allowed it to be so.
Right.
They're safe and sound. Why? We have a dual currency. We are allowed to keep US dollars as US dollars. We're doing the same as government.
Right. Minister, I want to talk about confidence because both yourself in this interview has mentioned confidence and of course the central bank has mentioned that Zimbabweans are not confident in the Zimbabwe dollar. So if you wish Zimbabweans to be confident, yet you as government are continuing to pay some allowances and benefits in US dollars, as well as charging fees and levies in US dollars, in some government departments, US taxes to the government to be now paid on a willing buyer, willing seller exchange rate regime, as you mentioned earlier. How does this show citizens that they themselves must have confidence in the Zimbabwe dollar if the government itself appears not to have the same confidence?
The government is using both currencies, the Zimbabwe dollar and US dollar. So is the private sector, so are private citizens. And that's okay. That's what we've allowed. There is no problem there at all. Yeah. What we've done is we've recognized that inflation is a challenge. It's obvious to everyone. That's why we've decided to increase the US dollar element in the salaries for civil servants. We added the extra $100 after reintroducing the $75 in hard currency. It's $175. And going forward, who knows what we'll do? We might just do more. But also we have to live within our means. It has to be affordable to us as government. So there's no problem with government using both currencies for fees, for salaries or whatever. The private sector is doing the same. We've allowed them to do the same.
Isn't there a danger that civil servants, for example, may take that US dollar component of salaries and go straight to the parallel market rate and change it, so driving the price of the parallel market upwards?
Well, you know what? What we're recognizing is that the citizens are using the US dollar for savings purposes. So I would be surprised if most civil servants are actually saving those US dollars. I'm not saying they are, but I wouldn't be surprised if they are. That's all I'm saying. But that is also the intention, that we want our civil servants to be able to save, to be able to afford certain hard currency denominated expenses that they have. But also they need the Zimbabwe dollar for continuous transactions. In fact, what is happening, Andy, is that easily 70% of the transactions in the last 12 months are in domestic currency. 70%, not hard currency.
But could that be also a reflection of conversion of money received from diasporans, for example, into Zim dollars in the parallel market, and then now your 70% comes into being?
I cannot say what exactly is driving it, but all I'm saying that when you look at the numbers don't lie. They are saying that 70% of the transactions are in domestic currency, 30% are in hard currency. So, and that's a good thing. So the fact that we're using more of the domestic currency is a good thing, but we're using both.
Now, I know you did touch on this, but I'd just like to reiterate and ask you the question again, if I may. The measures that have been announced last Saturday, and back to the confidence issue, because I talked earlier about pillow banks, people keeping currency under their pillows. How do these measures actually stimulate or create confidence?
Well, you know what? The raging parallel market rate removes confidence, reduces confidence. It increases uncertainty. So by instituting these measures, which the intention is to basically put a stop to this raging parallel market, slow it down, if not curtail it completely, is to deal with the confidence issue. Because we know that if we do that, that will really engender confidence, because certainly prices will then start coming down, because inflation is linked to the power rate, and the power rate just creates incredible uncertainty in the entire economy, in everything. So dealing with the power market is the key to dealing with confidence issues.
Minister, I want to now turn to the stock exchange. Now, the new measures announce the suspension of some services by stockbrokers. For example, the transfer of funds between accounts by brokers is now prohibited. There appears to be a belief by government that the stock market is being used as a medium for speculators and speculation. How is this, in your view, happening? And do you see any impact on the value of the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange in the near term?
Yes, we have some information that some players, speculative players in the market, were using the stock market for speculative purposes, both on the stock market and on the power market. So what they would do, they would invest using sometimes even loans from banks, from information we have, invest on the stock market, and you don't even know who they are, because they are sub-accounts in a normal broker's account, and that's been an arrangement for years. We've always had it like that. And then any process then that are made on the stock market are then placed on the parallel market, and the whole cycle begins all over again. And then they use whatever they make in the parallel market, they pay back the bank, and the cycle starts all over. So that's the information we have. So we have to act on that to break that vicious cycle, to prick that bubble. That's why we put this in place, because we're aware of that link in terms of driving the speculative bubble in the parallel market and in the equity market.
So is that the reason why capital gains, for example, up to 270 days has increased to 40%?
Absolutely. That's the idea, that we want to penalize short-term holdings on the equity market. We believe that will go a long way in curtailing speculative behavior. If you have to wait 9 months, maybe you might think again, at least reduce the amount that you then put onto the market if you have to wait 9 months.
So what are these new measures saying specifically to foreign investors? Do you believe, as critics suggest, this will deter new investors into Zimbabwe?
No, these measures are actually should be a positive message to investors, that government is serious about engendering certainty in the economy, about building confidence into the economy. Some of them appear tough, but also you want to know that there's a tough government that is managing things. You want to know that there's a weak government. There's a tough government that can take tough decisions, and we've taken some tough decisions, such as suspending lending. That's a very tough decision. That's what investors should understand, that that's what it takes to run things well, and they should be happy with these kind of measures.
Now, you did touch on this earlier. What impact has the unexpected inflationary pressures and parallel market exchange rate had on your growth and economic projections for 2022?
Yes, we still haven't revised our growth projections. We're still on 5% for the year, or just above that. Of course, we're still looking at the numbers. I have another 2 months to do that, finish that project, and then present these to Parliament at the mid-term, budget review, which I'll do sometime in sort of mid-July or so. So I've got time. We're working through the numbers, but also want to understand even the impact of what we've instituted as the measures. All of that has to be taken into account, but we're still positive about growth, because we believe that industry has access to foreign currency through the auction. Willing buyer, willing seller, they have access to foreign currency, and that's a very key ingredient in the economy. I mean, there are, of course, challenges, such as we know that the winter wheat program is affected by the prices of fertilizer and other pressures, global pressures.
It sort of takes me to two questions. The IMF have stated that they're looking at 3.8% growth in the sub-Saharan Africa, really based on food and fuel inflation coming from the problems, of course, between Ukraine and Russia. I think that's the first issue. I think that is what they're saying. So it seems that possibly growth numbers may be adjusted.
But even that is positive growth nonetheless. 3.8 is very good growth in my view. But of course we project higher for Zimbabwe, and we still haven't changed our view there. So even at that level, even to me, I'll put that as sort of the lower bound, so to say. That is still very good growth indeed, given where we've come from.
All right, thank you. And now, Minister, it's a direct question. Government has put in place these new measures. They've announced them. They're hoping to see something happen because of them. What are the so-called deliverables you expect to see, and in what sort of timeline?
No, we see certainly stability in the exchange rate. That's our expectation through these measures. We see the bubble in the both equities market and power market being pricked by these measures. We see perhaps a more usage of the domestic currency, and if we don't get those results, we'll do more. We have more measures in our back pocket, I can tell you. Another arsenal that will unleash to make sure that we bring sanity to the economy and get the economy, on that trajectory which was predicted in the NDS1 strategy and also in the budget. We want good growth. We want our citizens to be happier. We want more incomes for our citizens. We want inflation to come down. We want happier citizens, and that's really the intention of what we're trying to do.
Minister, some say the Zimbabwean government is being reactive and not proactive. And in fact, they believe that the government may not have really long-term policies or strategies to deal with some of the economic fundamentals, principally inflation and the exchange rate. They also point to various government interventions that in the past, although they were well-intentioned, did not work. Why do you believe, or does the Zimbabwe government believe, that these interventions will work this time.
For 12 months, when we put in the auction, and that worked. Right? The power rate stabilized, the gap between the power rate and the auction also stabilized. Inflation came down from well over 800% down to as low as 50%. Of course, it's been climbing up. So we have succeeded in the past. We know how to succeed, and we know what success smells like. So we know that if we take these kind of measures, things can work. So things have worked in the past. So we've taken these measures to make sure that we deal with this uncertainty, and we're hopeful that things will work. If they don't, we just put in more measures until it works.
Okay, Minister, while I have you, it's off the topic of the new measures announced, but could you give us an update on the interventions by government to ease the current transport blues, if I can call them that Zimbabwe's been experiencing over the last few weeks?
Well, in his announcement, the president, the head of state, also announced that he's opening up the market for public transportation, and will allow private operators now to also offer their services and get on with it and ply the routes and make money and provide transportation to our citizens. And that has been well received by the private transporters, and that's what we're getting. And we're beginning to see an improvement in the public transportation aspect. But of course, there'll be more rules will be gazetted as to the routes, specific routes and so forth. We're also going to increase the payments to those that are operating under the ZUPCO arrangement. We're also going to increase that. But also we're going to increase their access to liquidity and the working capital as they apply the routes before bills are finally settled. So this is really for the better, and I'm sure that the rules will be dealt with successfully.
Because citizens feel it's a double whammy. On the one side, prices of goods and services are going up, even prices of bus fares are going up. On the other side, of course, getting transport to home and work is getting difficult. What is there for the ordinary Zimbabwean citizen? When are your economic policies going to trickle down to the Zimbabwean citizen?
You know what? When we open up the transportation sector in the way we've done, that's a direct trickle down of a policy towards citizens, because it is citizens who are moving around the cities, moving across the country. So the more buses that they are available to them, combis or whatever forms of private transportation, the better, the more they feel that our policies are working. So surely, by taking the action that has been taken, this is by the president, that's the way to make sure that citizens feel the policies as we keep changing these policies. But also what we've allowed is these bus operators to import buses duty-free for the next 12 months. So that should increase and massify those who will be applying different routes across the country.
So you believe Zimbabwe's government has pro-people policies, and they'll ensure that pro-people policies drive whatever policy interventions will be going forward?
The Zimbabwe government intends not to leave anyone behind. No one will be left behind. It is pro-people, and people will feel the policies of this government as we go forward. A lot has changed. Just look at the quality of our roads, the quality of our dams, the way we have intervened in the cities to deal with various amenities that were going wrong. You can see that this government cares about people. When there is a drought, we give people food, we do cash transfers. Surely that kind of social protection of those who are vulnerable shows that the government cares about ordinary people.
Zimbabwe's Minister of Finance and Economic Development, Professor Ntuli Ncube, many thanks, sir, for appearing on the Mint Special.
Thank you.
This broadcast was brought to you by Zimpaper's TV network, ZTN. I'm Andy Hodges. Goodbye, and please, you all be safe.